The Sword in the Stone was released in 1963 and was directed by Wolfgang Reitherman, the first time a Disney animated film had a sole director, and is their 18th animated feature film based on the T.H. White novel The Once and Future King. The story follows a poor boy named Arthur who learns the power of love, kindness, knowledge, and bravery with the help of a wizard called Merlin in the path to become one of the most beloved kings in English history. As we near the end of yet another Disney era, it's always interesting to reflect on it as a whole. And though we're not quite done talking about the Silver Age, with the Jungle Book still waiting to be reviewed, it couldn't hurt to at least reflect on it a bit. After the wartime era, Disney really came back with a force, with some of its most beloved and classic films, but slowly we see near the end how unsustainable it was. With rising costs and lackluster box office, it led the team at Disney to seek cheaper alternatives to continue making movies, starting with 101 Dalmatians. The Silver Age is made up with some of Disney's most well-known stories and characters, and The Sword in the Stone serves as the outlier for that. A certain very few have seen it in comparison to the other films that make up this era, and it honestly has ended up mostly forgotten despite it being such a big change for the studio. Sword in the Stone continued the Xerox processing that saved Disney from closing the animation department, and it was the first animated film to have a sole credited director, with previous films having directors over certain segments rather than the finished project. Enter Wolfgang Reitherman, who ended up being the sole director for many more films to come. The Sword in the Stone actually begins its life in 1939 when Disney bought the rights to the first book of The Once and Future King, The Sword in the Stone. But it wasn't until after the release of 101 Dalmatians that the film actually entered production and became their next feature film. This movie is not one of Disney's beloved classics, and upon its release, it only received mixed critical reception and has slowly become more positively looked at through the years, but has never reached the heights of other Disney films in this era. And so, The Sword in the Stone mostly stays forgotten by a large group of people, and that is a shame. But at the same time, I don't think this film is all that great either. The Sword in the Stone, in my eyes, is their weakest effort since the wartime era, and I honestly can't point to anything that's necessarily bad in it. It's a good film, but it's also an aimless, meandering movie that doesn't really have anywhere to go past the first act. I do this every time I watch this film. The first 20 minutes are a lot of fun. I'm enjoying the characters, the humor, the story, and especially the music. Then the movie goes on for 20 more minutes, and I'm still on the film's side. It's still likable, I like the characters, but after that point, I'm pretty much done with the movie, and that's a shame. It just doesn't invest me after a while, because I feel like the film has shown me everything it has to offer by that point. Now, I don't have a problem at all with a film that's more about the adventure and the learning aspect. The story has Arthur being taught by the wizard Merlin, and you see him get in these situations that will eventually be beneficial to him when he becomes king. I love the idea of seeing a young Arthur becoming the great king from the legends. That's such a good idea, and reading The Sword in the Stone myself in high school, it should work. But it just doesn't. The narrative is just rather flat, and the characters can't sustain any momentum, unfortunately. We do get some scenes of Arthur being belittled by Kay, who is the son of the man in charge of Arthur, but that conflict feels like a footnote to make room for fun, whimsical scenes of Merlin instructing Arthur. It's a shame because the setup for this story is amazing. The classic Disney opening of the storybook opens up this movie as well with a beautiful song that sets the tone and explains the Sword in the Stone. You get the sense you are watching something deeply important, which is made all the funnier when the story itself is lighthearted in tone. And I like that a lot, and I think it works. Arthur is also a really likable character, serving as the audience's guide into this world and the story, and he's fun to be around, and gets into some really fun animated moments, such as Merlin turning him into different animals to train him. Merlin is also great in this, and as a callback to the book, he is constantly making references to modern day things that won't exist for hundreds of years in the story, and those moments are really funny. It's a nice turn, showing this funny baddie wizard teaching Arthur, and it's what keeps the film going for me. The likability of its characters. As I said, nothing is bad in the movie, it's just the meandering that becomes exhausting to watch. Thankfully, the movie does pick up near its climax with the introduction of Madame Mim, who only serves as an antagonist for the very end of the film and feels awkwardly placed into the movie since there's very little tension or obstacles in the rest of the film. But she's fun, and the creativity of the final fight between her and Merlin as they shapeshift, it's well animated and fun to see. The side characters are all pretty memorable too, such as Kay, Ector, and Pellinor, who always manage to get a laugh out of me. The end of the film is also very good as it goes back to the Arthurian legend as Arthur pulls sword from stone and becomes king of all England. It ends the story in a great spot where the adventures of Arthur are just beginning, and this was more or less his origin story and learning to be king. It's a great ending. I just wish the narrative didn't suffer. The second half really suffers from a lack of narrative momentum, which really dampens my enjoyment of the film. And no amount of fun scenes can help it because, as I said, by about the 40-minute mark, the film has pretty much offered you everything it has. Ultimately, the movie just ends up feeling too long. At an hour and 40 minutes, the film feels 20 minutes longer. There's also small little things that aren't necessarily problems, but fun observations, such as the voice of Arthur changing from scene to scene and even between lines, as if the boy playing him was going through puberty, which I think was the case, actually. At the end of the day, though, The Sword in the Stone ends up being a fine film. It has likable characters and fun moments, but it can't sustain its aimlessness for that runtime. There's just nowhere to go after a while. It does have some truly awe-inspiring moments, though, such as the scenes that open and close the film, and I like the idea of a film that's mostly Arthur learning about how to be a good king. But I just don't think it's told in the best way. It's still a good film in the end. It's just sadly a very forgettable one, and one of the weakest Disney films I've reviewed so far. And with all that said, I'm going to give The Sword in the Stone a 6 out of 10. I really wanted to like this movie more than I did, and for the first half, it was a lot of fun, but I grew tired of it pretty fast. But I would never call this movie bad. It's simply average, but still worth someone's time. But that's all I've got for you. What do you think of The Sword in the Stone? Let me know, and as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and stay positive.